The air over Ridgeway Avenue hung still, the late afternoon sun spilling across the cracked sidewalks like molten gold. The town was quiet, too quiet. A wind chime clicked weakly somewhere, and a dog barked once before falling silent again. At the edge of the street, a boy no older than 7 stood frozen. His small fingers clutched the sleeve of his worn jacket, and his breathing came in short, sharp bursts, like he'd been running for his life. The bruise on his cheek told a story long before his lips could. A few feet away, 6 motorcycles lined the curb, engines off, chrome glinting under the sun like sleeping giants. The men who rode them were cut from rough cloth, leather vests, heavy boots, eyes that had seen too much. But they weren't here for trouble that day, not yet. The boy's voice came out barely louder than a breath. "Please, someone help my mom." The man nearest him turned slowly. Mason Cross, the president of the Hells Angels Ridgeway chapter, was a wall of muscle and weathered skin, his arms inked with scars and stories of past sins. Behind him, his brothers, Troy, Diesel, Hawk, Ray, and Boone, watched in silence, the boy's trembling voice cutting through them more sharply than any blade ever had. Mason crouched down, his shadow stretching long over the boy. "What happened, kid?" The boy's eyes filled, tears tracing over the dirt on his face. "He hit her again," he whispered. "He hit my mom, and she didn't get up this time." The words landed like a blow. Mason's jaw tightened. Behind him, someone muttered a curse under his breath. The men exchanged quick, grim looks, because every single one of them had seen something like this before. Some had even lived it. "What's your name, son?" Mason asked softly. "Liam," he said. "My mom's name is Grace." He said if I told anyone, he'd hurt her worse. Mason stood slowly, his leather vest shifting with the movement. "Where's your house, Liam?" The boy pointed down the road, a small, sagging home near the end of the block, one window shattered, curtains fluttering like torn flags. That was all Mason needed. He turned toward his men, voice low, steady, final. "We ride." The words rolled like thunder through the quiet. The angels moved as one, helmets on, engines roaring to life, the sound rising like a storm building over the horizon. The ground itself seemed to tremble. Liam was lifted gently onto Mason's bike, small hands gripping tight around the man's vest. They took off down the street, the sound of engines echoing between the houses, turning every head in the neighborhood. When they reached the house, the front door was hanging half open. The sound of a man shouting came from inside, followed by the unmistakable crash of something breaking. Mason killed his engine and swung off the bike, motioning for his men to fan out. The yelling stopped. Then came silence. Mason walked up the porch steps like a storm in human form. Inside, a man stood over a woman crumpled on the floor, one hand still raised, face red and wild. A beer bottle lay shattered beside him. The man froze when he saw the shadow in the doorway, the leather vest, the stitched wings, and the look in Mason's eyes. "Who the hell are you?" the man barked, trying to sound braver than he felt. Mason didn't answer. He just stepped inside. The air changed, thickened, like the room itself was holding its breath. Behind him, the rest of the angels filled the doorway. No weapons drawn. They didn't need them. "You think hitting her makes you a man?" Mason said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it was heavy, like a judge pronouncing a sentence. The man's mouth opened, then closed. He took a step back. "You're gonna leave," Mason said. "Right now. You're not gonna pack. You're not gonna talk. You're gonna walk out that door and never look back." The man's face twisted, his eyes darting toward the others, 5 bikers standing shoulder to shoulder, silent, unflinching. He took another step back, hands shaking, then another. When his heel hit the doorframe, Mason leaned forward just enough for his voice to cut through the air like a blade. "Because if you don't, you'll wish you had." The man stumbled outside, tripping over his own feet before running down the street, muttering something that got lost under the hum of idling engines. Inside, Mason knelt beside Grace. Her lip was split, her breathing shallow, but her eyes fluttered open. She saw her son standing in the doorway, clutching his teddy bear, and she smiled through the pain. "You're safe now," Mason said, voice low. "He won't touch you again." Grace nodded weakly, tears slipping down her cheek. The other bikers quietly moved around the small house. One found ice from the freezer, another grabbed a clean towel, and another called for an ambulance. They moved with the care of men who had seen too much hurt and wanted for once to heal instead of harm. When the medics arrived, the angels stepped back, giving them space. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering, filming, trying to understand what they were seeing. Hell's Angels, the same men most feared, kneeling beside a broken woman and a trembling child. When it was over, and Grace was loaded into the ambulance, Liam ran back to Mason and threw his arms around him. "Thank you," the boy whispered. Mason looked down, his voice rough. "No need to thank me, kid. You did the brave part." The boy smiled, a small, fragile thing that somehow made the world a little brighter. The engines roared again as the bikers mounted their bikes, sunlight flashing off chrome and leather. Mason looked back once, watching the boy wave beside the flashing ambulance lights. He didn't wave back, he just nodded, because some things didn't need words. That night, as the sun sank behind the ridge, the bikes were lined up again outside Mason's old barn. No one spoke much. There was no celebration, just quiet, the kind that comes when justice is done. Mason sat on the steps, lighting a cigarette, staring at the fading glow of daylight. He thought of Grace, of Liam, of the way fear had turned to relief. He took a long drag, exhaled slowly and muttered to himself, "No one should have to live scared. Not a woman, not a child, not ever." The others nodded silently. They understood. And as the night settled over Ridgeway, the angels sat in the dark, their silhouettes framed by the glow of cooling engines. No headlines. No thanks. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the loudest act of kindness comes from the ones the world least expects. If this story touched your heart, reminded you that courage and compassion still ride side by side, like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Because sometimes kindness doesn't wear a halo. It rides in leather.